Good morning, my name is Glenys Shuntner from Regional Development Australia, Townsville, North West Queensland, or better known as RDA. Welcome to our webinar this morning, focusing in on the construction sector and employment. It's great to have you with us. RDA is really delighted to be running a project in partnership with the Department of Education, Skills and Employment to help drive connectivity in the construction sector between all the players to ensure we get good outcomes for the growth of the sector going forward. It's really about making sure we've got the right skills in the right place at the right time. RDA itself facilitates and advocates for economic development, so that's why we've partnered with the Australian Government to deliver this project. Today we're delighted to have a panel of leading industry experts with us, and I'd like to introduce them to you now. Joining us we have Eric Lollo, the Director of NQ Excavations, and Eric started his career as a plumbing, drainage and roofing apprentice back in 1984, not so long ago, Eric, and before moving into larger companies and broadening his experience in commercial and civil construction. Eric brings his considerable experience in pipeline and sewage pump station construction from right across North Queensland, the Northern Territory and as far as the Torres Strait, and has been working in the day-to-day operations of these companies. His breadth of experience in construction ensures that all work undertaken by the company is to a high standard and completed in a timely manner. Not only is Eric a director, but he also maintains a hands-on role as the chief estimator for the company. So welcome, Eric. I'd now like to introduce Noel Gertz, Managing Director of Common Country. Noel is the Business Development Manager for Civil Safety, and Noel has been a leading figure in the resources and infrastructure sector for over 30 years and has been recognised by the Queensland Resources Council for his work in Indigenous advocacy in that sector. Noel of the Gugu Badham people is a passionate advocate of employment for Indigenous people and is very well recognised right across our region for that role. Noel's previous roles have included working for TAFE and mining companies such as Copperchem, and he has been a regional manager for the Commonwealth Department of Education, Senior Community and Indigenous Liaison Officer for Kagara Mines, and Senior Advisor for Strategy and Engagement for Myuma. So welcome, Noel. Great to have you on board today as well. Next, I'd like to introduce Brad Hasewell, Business Manager for ProTech. Brad has worked in the recruitment industry for over 15 years for large international and national organisations, including Hayes, Toll People, and now ProTech. Initially specialising in white-collar recruitment, he's expanded his experience and expertise into the blue-collar sector, working with large Australian firms to complete major civil construction jobs across North Queensland. Brad likes to practice giving opportunities to individuals with the right attitude that may not otherwise usually get the chance to prove themselves and wants to be a positive influence in people's lives. So welcome, Brad. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome and introduce Tara Collison. Tara is the Operations Manager at Workways, one of our job actives in the North Queensland region, and we've been delighted to partner in this project with Workways since day one, many months ago. Tara comes to us with a wealth of experience in this sector and has over 10 years' experience in working with the employment sector, in particular helping job seekers find the job and training opportunities to be able to get full-time employment. So welcome, Tara. Great to have you here as well. So with that, I'd like to hand over to the panel now for a discussion today about construction and the employment sector, and hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenys. I'm just going to quickly run through our project on our website. So if you go to rdanwq.org.au, you will find the path to the over 200 construction projects that are currently under construction or will be looking for tenders in the near future. So on this list, we've highlighted quite a few projects that we will be discussing today. The intent of the conversations today will be around projects that are coming up. How do you get your workforce ready, workforce planning conversations, and how do you prepare to undertake these opportunities coming up? So we would be looking at projects like the Horton project, the Horton Pipeline project, the Carmichael Rail, and a few more. So Eric, would you like to start?
Yeah, well, to give a rough overview of the Horton project, it's a 180 centimetre fiberglass pipeline. It stretches about 70 kilometres from Ross River Dam to the Burdekin River. It's done in 2 stages. Stage 1 is all but complete, and then there's stage 1.1, which will be complete by the end of the year. And stage 2, I would suspect, will be complete within the next 2 years. So it's an ongoing project, and the type of contractors that we've used on the job is people far as owning their own bobcat and truck, through to fencers doing barbed wire fencing on realignments, construction of gravel roads, excavator, people with own plant, owner operators with their plant, such as excavators and loaders, and as well as contractors installing the pipe. Yeah, it's a major project amongst other major projects potentially coming up into the future.
So, Eric, when you were looking at resourcing for these jobs as the tenders were coming up, talk about the process you went through to prepare your business to pick up this.
Yeah, NQ Excavation's preference is to contract as much as the work as we possibly can, because it gives the company committed costs. But we try and support the smaller contractors and lift them up, and we did that on this project with a pipeline, Indigenous pipeline crew. They're also the concreter, so the size of their contracts end up in over $1 million. And these were companies that normally did jobs around that $500,000. So the contracts for the concreter end up about $2.5 million, and the pipeline contract end up about $1.8 million. So it did help lift them. And also the other advantages were the quality assurance, getting the 3 ticks as far as quality assurance, workplace health and safety, and environment, which brings your company to another level to tender on more like local government projects direct.
So did you have to work with your people in your supply chain, providers?
Yes, we employed the direct employees that we employed came through employment agencies. We employ our people through at the moment 2 different employment agencies. We go to them and request the type of people with what skills we need. But once we bring them on board, they go through a 6-month probational period, and depends on our core nucleus. We try and hang around 30 people as our core nucleus of employees. As some of those people leave town or leave the area or go and work for other companies, we bring some of the employment people from the employment agencies on to our books, and especially the people that are interested in doing training, and we train them through a Cert 3 and a Cert 4 for civil construction pipeline installation. And from there they can advance to supervision courses or go through to project management or construction management courses. So we do encourage the training.
Brad, you worked on the Horton pipeline.
Yes.
Talk about your experiences around how you helped the industry, the construction industry.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, obviously, alongside Eric as one of the principal contractors, we worked with another area within that. And essentially, similar to Eric would go to the employment agency and ask for, X, Y, and Z sort of skills. So for us, for our job is to find the right people and to, elevate people and lift them up in the opportunity that job provided. With that, we were looking at people with roller tickets, excavation tickets, loader tickets, truck drivers, general labourers as well. And I think, we would engage within potentially that CSQ funding to get training to, again, help support people that are out there maybe as labourers that then wanted to be, going into the role of positions. So I know that's where sort of Noel and civil safety can kind of come into that process. Obviously, again, for us, we would put together a contract to the principal contractor of a dollar value that we would obviously charge per hour, so that then they're able to figure out their costs around the labour side of it. And I suppose essentially, yeah, then we would then go out onto site and provide on-site support through safety engagements with our employees, and yeah, sort of basically build that up and replace as and where we needed to as well, and build up the workforce. At one point, I was saying to Eric before we started that we were at around the 30 or so people, which that has a massive knock-on effect to their families and to their friends around them. So I know that we had a number of Indigenous employees out there as well, and people that we'd engaged through the JSA providers too. So again, you know, one of the things that, you know, Glenys mentioned is that I like to be that positive influence on people. And if we can give people the opportunity that don't normally get it, then yeah, we can sort of start them on that career growth through training. And, you know, it was great to hear what Eric's saying about, you know, bringing them up to a supervision type of level as well. So yeah, really interesting.
Eric, do you have any other project you want to talk about?
No, yeah, the Horton project, NQ excavations has a wide variety of jobs. We do trunk water mains or major water mains infrastructure, sewage pump stations, sewage schemes. We've sewered Richmond and Western Queensland and Bardu Island up in the Torres Straits, and sewered the northern side of Hughenden. Yeah, there's I think North Queensland, and especially the Townsville area, going forward over the next 5 to 6 years, there's a lot of major projects. And if you look at projects like Copper String, I'm not quite sure when that's going to start, but the roll-on and benefits of Copper String is that it provides power out to the mining province out around the Mount Isa area, and there's like decades and decades of work out there building mines and the mining industry. So that'll have a direct impact on Townsville businesses. You've got the raising of the Burdekin Dam. If they raise the Burdekin Dam, that'll put a hydro scheme which could put power into the Copper String. There's other projects like the battery factory out at Woodstock. There's also being put forward another nickel refinery out at Woodstock area. Hydrogen plants down near the port. They're widening the port for future exports out of Townsville. The skills, and I think now is really a good time to look at growing your business. Times are pretty tough at the moment, but to look for opportunities, and as I said, there's a lot of opportunities there for people to start growing their businesses, training, get good people around them. And that with the view that in 5 to 6 years' time, they could be picking up a lot of these works.
So let's talk about the battery plant. What sort of skill sets would you think and roles would come out of that project?
The battery plant, I've never seen any plans or anything on it, but it would be normally a large civil component to it, which would be levelling of land, building of car parks and building pads, putting stormwater in, sewage infrastructure being treatment plants and sewage pump stations, firefighting facilities, as far as fire pumps and reservoirs. And then you get into the building construction side of it, where, again, I'm not sure what the structure would be made of, but there'd be boilermakers, there'd be plumbers and roofers, electricians, concreters, a lot of people like that. And that'd be very similar to the nickel refinery plant out next to it. Will go through that construction phase. So there's really, with construction, there's two parts to construction. There's the civil construction, which is really the earthworks, the services, the large services, or the services under the ground. And then you've got the building construction side, where you've got a lot more trades.
Let's talk about a project that is not in an urban area. Something like Carmichael Mines.
Yeah, again, I know of Townsville companies that have been successful with work down there, and they're saying that the pay's good. The Carmichael mine, they're really looking after people. They've got flights flying straight from the mine to Townsville, so that stops fatigue, people driving fatigued and creating accidents or hitting livestock. I think
the rail project.
Yeah, the rail project. and providing, it's not for everyone working away from town and working for mines, and it depends on the rosters. There's, maybe 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or there's all different types of rosters, and it suits some people and it doesn't. The thing I'd recommend that if you're going to go into that type of area and do that type of work, make your employees aware that, that is different. You don't see your family for 3 weeks. Some people can handle that really good. Some people don't handle it well. They miss their kids and their family.
Yeah. So, Noel, you were heavily involved in resourcing for the Carmichael Rail project. We'll talk about your work and your experience in trying to, facilitate and match those roles and skill sets for your contractors and delivery partners.
Sure. The Carmichael Rail project is an example of a number of projects that we try to analyse well in advance to work out the key ramp-up stages, the numbers of people, the skill sets. So, like all training organisations, civil safety, which is the one I'm associated with, we do look at those projects and work out specific technical skills training. But probably the most important thing we try to do is to talk to potential participants in those programs about the issues Eric raised there, and also remote mine sites where you're away from home and what we call remote rostered employment. There's another factor that we look at called in relation to communal living. So when you're on those sites, you've got to be able to understand you're in a small camp. At night time, you've got to respect your neighbours. There's a whole lot of issues like that that we also work with the clients who think that they might want to work out on those sorts of projects. We obviously work closely with Tara and the other job actives to bring people into our training centre. When COVID-19's not around, we've sort of got a regular process of graduates going through that could be onboarded to any number of projects. And as was previously discussed, Townsville's, I think, going to be on the cusp of a big boom probably early next year onwards. And if you not only look at the construction projects, which we're focusing on today, Townsville also happens to be the centre for fly-in, fly-out areas that, there's going to be a couple more coal mines come on board next year. So we probably, as a collective in Townsville, need to start thinking about how we can attract, sort out our own people first, give them first opportunity. But there are going to be positions that we might have to import people. We need to start to attract those skills here.
Tara, would you like to talk about your experience with how you facilitate that employment pathways?
It's just about having conversations with our clients. So one, talking to training providers, employers, finding out what's coming up, what skill sets they're looking for, and then going back to our client base and having conversations with them to find out who would be interested, who already has skill sets, anyone that needs to be upskilled, reskilled, and then putting them through those opportunities to then be able to move into these projects. So our client base is varied. So, we have everything from 16-year-olds up to 65-year-olds, wide variety of backgrounds, and some of them come very heavily skilled, and it's just a matter of, introducing them to the Brads and Erics of the world and getting them back into employment, or it's about actually skilling them to move into these, opportunities.
Yeah. So would you, between you, Brad and Tara, let's talk about the benefits of working with a provider, it's to facilitate that resourcing.
Yeah. So we actually work very closely with Workways already. What we tend to do is, engage with them and some of their employees or their clients, and work them through our onboarding process. So, and again, I won't go into huge amounts of detail about that, but we do go through our onboarding process so that essentially we interview and make sure that they've got the right skills that we require for, the client, that we're actually working for. So again, that can sort of wheedle out, say, maybe people that aren't reliable or people that have got great skill sets, that perhaps just need that additional opportunity that they may get through an employment agency rather than, direct with the principal contractor. And yeah, look, that's how we currently work with the JSAs in Townsville. But again, look, I'm sure we can probably do more and engage more. So,
right. Well, we just ran a poll about whether or not our participants would prefer to employ directly or through an employment provider, and 100% of our respondents have said through an employment provider. So we're already on the right path. Thank you, everyone. Yes. So let's talk about expectations around a construction site. Let's talk about what are employers looking for in an employee.
Well, honesty and loyalty is obviously one, and being punctual, being on. If the site starts at 7 o'clock, we insist, or not insist, but we expect our employees to be there at least 10, 15 minutes before. Be clean as far as drugs and alcohol. We do random drug and alcohol testing for fit for work to make sure we are providing a safe environment. Respect is a big thing. We find if you've got a person that's going to respect you and you respect them back, it's a lot better workplace or a happier environment. When you get people that are pushing back and don't respect you and disrespectful to their senior people, it usually brings your team down. So you want people that are honest, respectful, reliable. It's most probably it's a big list, but there are people out there that we do find you go through a lot of people, so don't get disheartened that you can't seem to find the right people, but you persevere with it, and you do end up getting good people. We find the best way to get the good people is identify them at a labouring stage, and then train them within the company to the company, the way the company does things and procedures and that, because all companies have different procedures and different way they do things, and so yeah, we find it's good to get somebody, a younger or even an older person, but identify that respectful.
Yeah, Noel, do you have anything to add to that?
We just remind our graduates of our training program about we call it the AAA. That's attendance first and foremost, a good attitude, and then aptitude comes after, but that's the third part of it. And aptitude can be sort of retrained or reorganised, but they've got to be responsible for their own attendance. And as they were saying, 15 minutes early is too late, possibly. That's probably one of the things we try to emphasise, and just the general awareness of safety. I think, as Eric outlined, our job is to make people generally aware of those issues, and then each site's got their own way they train people in more specific detail.
Yeah. So am I hearing that technical skills you can teach, but the soft skills is a little bit harder to achieve? Yeah. We ran a poll earlier about what would you look for? What would you place more importance on, skills or attitude? And I think 100% of our respondents said attitude.
Yes.
So how do you think training can prepare a potential employee for you?
There's no denying the fact that people do have to come with, in some instances initially, the technical competencies. That's just, in some of the high-risk sites, they're mandatory requirements. So where we can assist in that matter, and bear in mind, as a registered training organisation and in conjunction with Workways and other government funding, there's potentially, depending on the level of disadvantage or eligibility of an individual, there's anything up to $4,000 to sort of $7,000 to $8,000 worth of pre-investment, and that's before they hit the traineeship or apprenticeship stage. This is just generally preparing people for the workforce, and then if they are lucky enough to land a job and as a labourer and then go on to be upskilled into a traineeship, apprenticeship, that's a whole range of additional funding from the Queensland government as well. But we just, as I said before, we tend to just focus on making sure bear in mind too, we also get there's a couple of different categories of people we have. There's people who might have just come off another job somewhere and go through your refreshers, and we deem them as, you know, reasonable people that we would like to on board. But in the main, we deal with long-term unemployed people, and that's the focus of the government. And if we can get an opportunity to those people, the other cohort we deal with are people who aren't registered with Job Active. There's quite a few out there. For a range of reasons, they're not there because of, you know, parental income or some other non-eligibility issue. They don't get that funding, so we get referred people from other agencies like the Department of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, other community organisations who do work with long-term unemployed. They're also a source of our people in the training. So that's sort of in normal times, we have that on an ongoing basis.
I've got a question for Brad. How do you attract people to remote site locations?
Cool.
It's all about information. So we've run a series of information sessions with people that are currently working out there or associated in remote areas, just to sort of talk about the environment, pros and cons. So that way they get a full picture of, you know, what they're heading into and the remoteness of it. And then they usually will either say, yes, that's, you know, a fine environment, or they'll elect themselves to remove themselves from that sort of situation. But we try and provide them with as much information as possible so that way they can get a full picture. It doesn't always work because they still think, yes, it's going to be fantastic, and then they do get out there and they realise, yeah, the camp environment, the close quarters and all the rest of it just isn't for them. And then others, thrive on it.
Yeah, and look, I'd agree 100%. Look, we work on the CRN project, which is, you know, currently running on a 3-on-1 roster. And yeah, look, that is not, you know, sustainable for some people. Look, again, I've worked in recruitment and mining for a while, and the number of relationship breakdowns that you hear about within that, because they're away for so long, is really saddening to hear. So, I mean, I think it's probably important for these organisations to look at the rosters, because they're cutting down a potential amount of employees that they could look at. What we do in terms of selling the opportunity or finding the right people is, to paint that picture, probably in its worst light, so that people are going into it with their eyes fully open, and that when they get out there, they're not surprised. So what we do is we've taken photographs of the site. You know, I guess it's ever changing, but is giving them that idea of the amount of isolation. The fact that the mobile phone signal is very, very sketchy at best. So being able to communicate with those back home, again, if you're able to communicate every night, makes it a little bit easier. And again, those kind of things potentially could create issues within the mind and potentially then roll on into a safety aspect. So again, all of these things have to be discussed at length with any person that would be going out into, whether it be that project or any of the other projects as well. But I think it's also the employer's responsibility to decide what is going to be the best outcome for safety, results, and also, I guess, the well-being and mental well-being of the people working there.
So Eric and Noel, you're interested in the copper string project. It is a huge project. Geographically, it stretches from
Townsville to Mount Isa.
Yes. So how would you prepare for something like that? And Noel, would you cover the aspect of, resourcing?
We would obviously you'd get in contact with the principal contractor on that project. I'm not sure how I see they called for registration for principal contractors, and they would normally be your tier 1 contractors, your thesis or your CPBs, your Lend Lease, the larger contractors, and then try and when they call for tenders, you would price to those companies, and then that gives you the opportunity to put your best foot forward, because usually tied to the tenders is not only the dollar value, it's also the training, the employment and training of Indigenous people, your safety systems, your environment systems, your quality assurance systems. So, yeah, you get an opportunity to show them those qualifications, if you call them qualifications, that your company has, and then constantly just stay in front of them, just keep your name in front of them after you do the tender. Contact them before the tender closes for the main client, just to say, hey, could we assist you and provide any additional information, because they collate the information from the tenders and put it into their tender, a lot of copy and paste, so they go back to the client and they get scored. So,
so out of a major contract, there'll be a multitude of smaller contracts.
Yes, yeah, and it depends on how they propose to deliver it. They could break it down as far as Townsville to, hypothetically, Charters Towers. Someone will pull all the concrete footings, and then somebody will come through and stand the poles. Or they could give all that works to one contractor who will feed it down to someone that will excavate the holes, and then somebody who will do just tie the steel, another contractor to do the formwork around the steel, and another contractor to pour the concrete, and then somebody else to stand the poles or prefab the poles, where another contractor comes. So it really depends on how the principal contractor chooses to deliver. Some choose to self-perform and just employ all their own people to go and do it.
So now then Eric comes to you and says, I've got this campsite happening 400 kilometres away. I need 12 people.
Sure. You mentioned the copper string program, and if you look at another big, large looming project, the Singapore Defence Project at Greenville, what we try to do in our own little small part of the world of workforce planning, we try to look at all those projects and when they're going to come on stream, whether they be a small one where we're employing 5 people to do a bit of landscaping for 2 or 3 weeks, or whether it's a small, medium size, and there's one that we haven't talked about, the Marine Precinct up the tourism project just not far from us here. So there's a whole range of activity that we know is going to occur, and there's advantages and disadvantages of employment providers, but one of the advantages, and particularly in relation to the construction industry, as opposed to the mining industry where you've got 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 years of static employment, with the construction industry you have to look at the fact that there's finite timeframes with it. So part of our job is to sit with the government and other people and analyse the sequence of projects. Some employers will have fixed employees they'll have, but there's always a fairly large percentage of the workforce, the construction workforce, that via collaboration and coordination with people like Brett and the other employment services, we get a handle on who's around, and we just keep an eye on the fact that they might start on a project and go for 3 months. There might be another project for 6 months. But what we're trying to do is prepare people in a sequence so that they can move from one project to another. Hopefully we're increasing their skill level at each stage, but we also understand and accept this people come through school, so you always have a cohort that you're going to have to bring on as beginners. So we do that in conjunction with a whole lot of partners. It's not just us, but that's what we have to do. Right. So yeah, it's a matter of us all collaborating and working together to make sure that when a project starts, we've got people ready to go.
I think a good point is that we've all talked about the remote projects, and as those remote projects come online, I think it was Noel said that they're going to be flying in and flying out of Townsville. That also increases work locally in the Townsville area, like your parkside developments and your stocklands, and that will be developing more land, which means more subdivisions have got to happen, then the builders have got to build more houses, and then with that come more shopping centres, more schools. So it's not only the work for remote areas, it's also there's going to be a lot of work coming up in Townsville itself.
Yeah, it's the knock-on effect.
Yes.
Yeah, it's massive. That certainly will happen in Townsville.
Do we feel that we have explored the working remotely conversation enough?
Yeah, I mean, I might sort of jump in back, you know, to what these guys were saying, just in terms of the recruiting process. So, you know, you mentioned about Eric needing 12 individuals. So, you know, if an organisation, you know, whichever tier it would be, they would feed down what needs to happen for those particular areas for that particular project. So it could be that they come directly to an employment agency like ourselves going, right, this is what we need. We can then actually facilitate the engagement with your Knowles and your Taras to kind of go, guys, this is what's going to be happening. But for most of these projects, there is a level of engagement that you have to, a certain amount of training hours that you need to put in. There's also a certain percentage of Indigenous engagement that you have to put in as well as part of the majority of these projects. So there's, you know, a big connection for us with, you know, the on common country to bring those people through. And also I think, you know, it then looks really good in terms of what the result is for, you know, for the principal contractor, because then that assists on their next project that they put in for tender for, because they've got something to hold on to from the previous project. So yeah, I think it's really, and for us as an employment agent, we need to become that one-stop shop for, you know, for the principal contractors, that we build those relationships with Indigenous and training organisations as well.
So we haven't got someone representing the training. Well, we had hoped to get CSQ here, but no, you're it.
I was working for 5 years, but things have changed.
Let's discuss the training opportunities to skill, you know, to assist with skilling for a new workforce and skilling your current workforce.
Like all things, it's about understanding the need, and it's not an exact science, but you do have to second guess when there's going to be peaks and troughs. Construction Skills Queensland has a set of funds that are available to private contractors to either upskill in their existing roles, and there's provisions too. It's not just an open situation. There's circumstances where they've had to work in the industry for the last 4 years and sometimes demonstrate a 6-month continuous. There's a range of things that Construction Skills Queensland people can speak on with a bit more authority than I can about eligibility there. But they do have those sorts of funds. They're pretty unique, really. There's similar types of programs in other states, but Queensland, I think, has got by far the best investment. The Queensland Government themselves have Cert 3 guarantee funding. They also have user choice funding for apprenticeships and traineeships, and as well as that, the Commonwealth via the contracted job actives have money too that they provide, provided that obviously they see that there's an opportunity for employment tender. So it's once again, it just goes back to us trying to understand the skills that are required in advance, designing training programs around those requirements. Sometimes they are just off-the-shelf Certificate 3 level programs, most importantly, but that's for long-term unemployed. But if we can customise something in advance with the receiving employer, they're probably the best ones.
Yeah, so
targeted skill sets. So it's all about, it coming from the employer down to us and then us feeding it back up through. So if we know exactly what an employer is looking for, then, you know, we can sit down with civil and create a package and then source employers, you know, potential employees that want to move into that industry, skill them, and then the employer's got a workforce that he can tap into.
Yeah.
Either directly or via agencies.
Yeah, and it's also when they're on site. So, Eric might identify that individual that has potential to grow. They can, if they're our employee, then they can obviously let us know, and then we can engage the CSQ funding. So we've done that for, say a number of employees, so that then, as Noel sort of said earlier, that they can then progress into the next project, into a new role. It is, I think, we have a social responsibility to assist people and to help elevate, and the government obviously is helping with the CSQ funding around that as well. So, but yeah, it's all about getting them on site to start with, and then ingraining that, the 3 A's, and then building up skill sets beyond that.
Probably just another quick element, and it's going to be it's already with us now, and Townsville's pretty mature around this issue, but a lot of clients, funders of projects, whether they be private, mostly government at this stage, but more and more the corporate world's picking it up, where there's a requirement to deal sometimes through legislation and legal access to that land with traditional owner groups, the ones that actually have their current native title, or they're going through a native title process, and that in itself it was a complex process initially. It still has got some things that we've got to work through, but I think more and more I see from my point of view, the corporate world, and particularly the people who are putting the tenders in, are now understanding that that's part and parcel of the project. Initially it can be problematic, but I think as we go through those processes and get ourselves on both sides a little bit more organised, that just becomes a normal part of the process. And some of the companies or individuals that get on because of the Indigenous employment process, hopefully after that they prove that they can do the job just as good as anyone else. And I know that Eric mentioned a particular company that I'm aware of, and what I understand is they got their start in life and with those unsteady feet, and now they're just, I understand, competitive and can just do the job as good as anyone else. So
they're very good operators.
And that will occur, more and more of that interaction with local traditional owners in terms of how those projects unfold, not just cultural heritage, and not just employment. There'll be, if those groups can get themselves together in terms of a business sense, there's opportunities for them to partner with skill and existing business initially, and gradually start to run their own business as sole operators or as a consortium.
And that's right, what I was saying, because a lot of the tenders, as I was saying before, is assessed not only on a dollar value, it's also on the employment and training, and be Indigenous training or training of people. The government, especially funding government projects that have government funding, look for that. And if you go into a tender and you say, no, I'm not training anyone, I've got no trainees, stuff like that, you'll score worse than somebody that says, yes, we are training 3 Indigenous people and 3 non-Indigenous people, or whatever it is, but you really need to demonstrate that training and upskilling, it's really important.
Great. We have also run last week a webinar session on funding available for training delivered by CSQ and TAFE. So if you are interested in looking for more information, particularly links directly to give you real information around funding available and back to work programs, go to our website, and there should be a recording of that webinar available next week. Having said that, is there anything that we'd like to finish off this session?
Just to emphasise that point you made about back to work, that's a pretty, I think, very effective program. I'm not sure it's ongoing certainly, but it's around and available for those people who are eligible under the rules, and it's a big incentive, I think. And if you talk to people in the Queensland Department of Employment, they'll be able to help you out there with back to work, and particularly on the youth side of it as well.
Eric, would you like to?
Yeah, well, I think if you've got the right mindset and you employ people, certainly have a go. There's there's lots of opportunities coming up, and depends on which industry you're in, but I see civil construction and building construction going ahead, potentially for the next 5 or 6 years. And I don't know how far out we can look. As I said, some of these projects that if they go ahead, like the Copper String, the Hells Gates Dam, they have impact on the Townsville community potentially for the next 50, 60, 100 years. And it'll help the growth of Townsville and employment.
Great. All right, thank you, everyone. That's a wrap up for us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.